Should the Auburn Tigers think about redshirting one of their most talented young running backs? And the tournament starts today. We'll give you the Tennessee score, and we'll give you an update on the games coming up tonight for the SEC. That's all coming up next on the SEC Country Live. And a happy Thursday to everybody out there. SEC Country Live. Hans Heiser in for Brandon Adams. Brandon is out getting ready for the big event tonight. Mike Johnson in his captain's chair as always. And so BA's got an event going on with Dog Nation at the Roxy Theater down at the Battery here in Atlanta. We expect a big turnout. A couple of 5 Georgia Bulldogs going to be drafted and about to get a nice check.
I've been saying all week that we've had a couple of guys in this seat because Brandon Adams has been out. Tonight is Brandon Adams' Super Bowl. Like this, like Brandon Adams walking around the building, puffed out, like he's got the eye of the tiger. Like this is it. Like I feel like he's gonna run through the door when he gets the.
There's going to be a great crowd. I sent, they gave us all here at SEC Country some tickets to send out to the family and friends, and I just sent it out thinking, some Georgia fans maybe they'd like to go or whatnot. They're still so stoked about what happened this year, and the fact to actually go and meet Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, Bellamy, some of the guys that were responsible for this senior class and getting to where they were. It's going to be a great event, a great turnout. You can go on to SEC Country, our Facebook page, and we'll give you some comments there, instructions there as far as if you're in the Atlanta area and you want to go to the event. What's going on with you, man? Everything good? You've been watching. I saw you in there watching a little basketball. You're a big guy. Did you play hoops growing up or no?
Listen, I'm so vertically challenged, it's not even funny. My vertical is probably about that. I don't know what it was at the combine when I went, but I probably got about that far off the ground. I was meant to play offensive line, if you know what I mean. Like there was no getting up to the rim for me. I could touch the rim. I think I might have dunked once when I was like a sophomore in high school. Never got much farther than this. So I like to watch from afar. I've been keeping track of the tournament like you guys out there in the comment section have been doing. There's been already a great game on the board today, but that was nothing that I ever intended to take part in was a basketball game. It wasn't for me.
Well, Tennessee got the win. We'll talk a little bit of college basketball, just a little bit of college basketball coming up in a second. But we'll start off with our first and 10 today, and we'll lead off with the Auburn Tigers. New offensive line coach. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the program. But one of the most talented running backs coming in, the third-ranked recruit in all the nation, Mr. Martin from Decatur, Alabama. There's some speculation because of the depth in front of him, because of some of the experience in front of him, potentially could be a guy that's redshirted this season.
Yeah, and listen, I've tried to dissect this from top to bottom because it feels like Asa Martin's been a guy we've been talking about since me and Brandon started doing the show. Asa Martin's name has come up a ton. He was Mr. Football over in Alabama, which is always a big deal for a lot of those people over there. I think he's the 11th Mr. Football in the state of Alabama to actually head to Auburn to play football. And the thought of that, a guy like that, with Kerryon Johnson and Cam Petway leaving, boy, how do you keep a guy like Asa Martin on the field? When you start to break down the names and the numbers of who's going to be playing that running back position, I thought Lauren Shute did a great job of really trying to break things down and understanding the speculation that surrounds the red shirt.
Yeah, Cam Martin got to see a little bit of him last year. You have to expect for him to be the bell cow, but he's not going to be the bell cow like we saw last year. He's not getting the ball 25, 30 times a game like Kerryon Johnson is. That's not going to be the recipe for success. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Here's what Lauren had to say.
Yeah, Lauren had to say, while lots of Auburn fans would love nothing more than to see the true freshman step up and dominate, he will likely end up redshirting during his first season on the Plains. This is less about Martin's aptitude and more about what Auburn has seen from his other backs thus far. Things can change over the course of the summer, especially when the Tigers are so eager to find a go-to back, but a redshirt wouldn't be the worst thing for the Decatur, Alabama native. And listen, she goes on to mention what they have as far as depth. They've got Devin Barrett, they've got Jartavius Whitlow, Cam Martin, Malik Miller, C.J. Tolbert. I don't know how you pull any of those guys out of one of those roles. So I understand what Lauren Schute's saying. It was a head scratcher for me. I went in and read the article. I talked about the depth at the running back position. We've talked about how rough some of the things are going to be surrounding that offensive line, surrounding that wide receiver core, surrounding trying to find that every down running back. I like Devin Barrett. I like Jartavius Whitlow. A lot of people love what Cam Martin brings to the table. Where does Asa fit in? I think is what Lauren Schute's trying to say. A couple of these guys have already redshirted. That's not optional.
You got a senior.
And the rest of them are upperclassmen. It's not like you can turn back and say, boy, you're going to be a junior, but we got this kid coming in. Why don't you take a red shirt this year? And so as much of a head scratcher it is for me to look at that Auburn backfield and think, man, Asa Martin might not be a part of this, I think she brings up some good points. She says, listen, physically, you get in there, you start to develop into a college player. Have a year to develop within this offense, start to figure things out under Chip Lindsey and Gus Malzahn. And why not take the opportunity to take more of the hits off a guy like Asa Martin so that in the end he becomes the player he should be.
Let me ask you about the whole red shirt thing. You know, you're one of the top athletes in the country. He committed a long time ago. Asa Martin, he's from Decatur, Alabama. I don't know that anybody else was really in on him. I think Nebraska was a team that heavily recruited him, but he committed to them a long time ago. But I wonder he had to know that the depth chart in front of him.
Yeah.
So what's your mindset going into this? Is part of your brain, I know you can't answer for him, but as a former student scholarship athlete, you've got to be thinking coming in there, I got all these guys in front of me. Maybe I don't get to play this year, but I'm still willing to take a chance because even if I don't play this year, get my body right, get my mind right, and then it's all mine in a year or two.
Listen, you hit it right on the head because I think as a lot of recruits, and especially when you're that big a deal, when you're Mr. Football in Alabama, when you're your 5-star running back, 4-star running back, whatever it is. Listen, those coaches, they get you on campus. What are they saying? Boy, we've got to have you. You're the future of this program at this position. We've had some legendary running backs here at Auburn. You're the next one in line. You're the next coming. We're going to plug you right in. You'll be a part of this offense. And then the recruitment starts. And then a guy like Asa Martin gets on campus and he realizes, boy, I was really good a year ago when I was in high school, but all these guys are really good that are on this roster right now. And so I think when you start to look at it from that perspective, Asa Martin's going to have a little bit of an ego check. I mean, I think he is. Listen, that's always the talk when running backs are headed to a place like LSU or a place like Alabama or a place like Georgia nowadays where you have these running back stables. Can you get on the field early? And obviously Asa Martin has, his sights set on getting in the field. And it's not like this is set in concrete. This is Lauren Shute speculating about what she thinks. But I think that Auburn fans technically would agree with her and the fact that you're going to have 6 guys that can play that position next year. So if you can redshirt a guy like Asa Martin, get an extra year out of him, make sure on the back end he's really ready to contribute, I think that's the route Gus Malzahn has to take. I think it's up to Asa Martin to make Gus Malzahn's mind up for him and force him to say, listen, you're not going to be able to keep me off the field.
It really is incredible to think about these 18 and 19-year-old kids that are early enrollers that get onto campus, buy into the weight training, the nutrition, everything. You see the difference between an 18-year-old kid when they step foot on campus and when they come home from Christmas.
Right.
Seriously, they come home from Christmas, you're like, I don't even recognize this guy.
Yeah.
They've been working out, they've been eating, but to be able to compete in late August and September, it's a real testament to their athleticism and just how special athletes these guys are that do play as true freshmen.
No, I completely agree with you. And things have hit such another level. I got to school, back in the summer of 2005. I got to Alabama. Then all of a sudden, listen, then you have your protein powders. You got your B12. You're taking your vitamins. You're at the training table. Somebody's developing a nutrition plan for you. All the while, you're waking up at 6 a.m. You're going to get these hour-and-a-half workouts in. You're running. You're lifting weights. Your cleans. Your squats. And then you're going to class. Then you're going to study hall. And then you're going to football practice the next day. And you really do develop such a ton there in year one. Asa Martin, to me, is a little bit slighter than I think he would like to be. I think you'd like to see a guy like that a little bit bulkier up top. I have no doubt that physically he will be ready to do it by the time the fall runs around. It's just the numbers, I think, that leave things as a little bit of a head scratcher for what they're trying to do.
And the SEC as a whole, and we'll talk a little bit more about LSU's situation at that position later in the show, but the SEC as a whole, we talked about Michelle and Chubb right off the bat, is losing a lot of talent at that position. And last time I checked, the SEC continues to put good running backs in the league. So, don't worry if you're an Auburn or an LSU or a Georgia fan. They got guys that they've recruited that are going to be able to step in and fill that void.
Yeah, listen, it's for my money, obviously you guys know me, I'm an Alabama guy. Damian Harris is really the torchbearer for a lot of these different positions. You've got some younger guys. You've got some good running backs in South Carolina. I like some of the younger guys they have over at Texas A&M, but Darius Geis is gone, Nick Chubb's gone, Kerryon Johnson's gone. Damian Harris coming back to school ends up being a big deal when you look league-wide. I mean, look at John Kelly up at Tennessee. He's really one of those guys that could have been, a crazy good back. Last year you had Alvin Kamara at Tennessee the year before him. Really the statement at the top, you're going to have situations like this around the SEC where you start to look at the running back stables and say, boy, who, as far as the SEC goes, always great running backs. Who's going to be the next guy to really carry the load at the top?
And there always is one.
There always is one. You're going to have a running game in the SEC. You're going to have these great offensive lines. You're going to have great front sevens, and that's what makes it so fun on Saturdays in the fall.
Number 2 on our top 10 today, we're talking a little basketball. Tennessee, by the way, they've already played their game. They took care of Wright State. Didn't see the final on that. There you go, 73-47.
Blowout.
Blowout city there. Tennessee advances. And what can you say about the job that Rick Barnes has done at Tennessee?
Yeah, I saw a stat earlier today, and I have to believe this broke it. Rick Barnes, in his last 7 tournament games, actually lost against the spread. 0-7 in his last 7 tournament games as a head coach against the spread. Well, you see, what is that, 73-47?
I'm pretty sure they covered today.
I think Tennessee and the Volunteers covered today. And listen, They're hitting their stride at the right time. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know a ton of basketball X's and O's. You guys know on this show the one thing we don't do is lie to you about what we do know. I'm not going to sit here and fluff y'all up. But I watched the Wright State-Tennessee game while we were getting ready for the show. Tennessee's hitting their stride right now. I mean, really, they look incredible. I think Tennessee and Kentucky, both those teams that played in the SEC Tournament Championship game, really hitting their stride at the right time, and Tennessee deals with Wright State accordingly there in round one.
Problem with Kentucky is if they win, they got Davidson, and then the problem with that is you got Arizona with DeAndre Ayton, who's probably the best college player in the last 25 years. And if you win that, you get Virginia, the #1 overall seed. So it's going to be tough sledding for Kentucky. One thing I want to mention about SEC basketball briefly is the caliber of coaches that they're bringing into the conference. Kentucky's always going to have their guy.
Right.
Coach Callen, what he's done from a recruiting standpoint. But we just talked about Rick Barnes, right? Coach Martin at South Carolina. Georgia's in talks to possibly hire Tom Crean, a guy, from Marquette in Indiana. I think that the coaches, and we see this in the ACC with their football coaches, how they're trying to keep up with the Joneses. I mean, you put those coaches on paper, in what they've accomplished in the sport. The SEC is a conference in basketball. I don't want to say they're not going to be taken lightly, but they're putting themselves in the conversation with the ACC as one of the top basketball conferences in America.
No doubt. And one of our topics yesterday was, are any SEC teams actually going to make it to the second weekend of the tournament? So, because you have a ton of teams in from the SEC, but really how much damage can some of these teams do? But I got to tell you, I mean, we had that talk last year. Would they have 3 teams in the Elite Eight last year from the SEC really making a run? We talk about South Carolina and some of the other teams out there. Kwanzaa Martin at Missouri, Avery Johnson in Alabama. He's taking Alabama to a new level.
Ben Howland played in back-to-back national championships at UCLA.
A lot of these teams within the SEC are hitting levels that we just haven't seen in a while. And so I think that really is starting to play out in some of these head coaches. Even, is it Kermit Davis they just hired at Ole Miss, from Middle Tennessee? Everybody is really, really excited about that hire over there in Oxford, Mississippi. And I think he fits in right along with the dialogue that you were just talking about. SEC coaches, SEC basketball programs really are starting to hit a new high. And then obviously, you guys saw the graphic talking about tonight's games, the SEC teams taking the floor. There's going to be some great matchups tonight when you look at some of these, 12-5, 11-6, 9-8.
Watch out for the Bonnies, baby.
Listen, a lot of people are saying, Davidson versus Goliath down here, 12-5. You're going to have the 12-5 every year. Obviously, it's going to happen at some point. A lot of people jumping on that Davidson bandwagon against Kentucky tonight.
We'll see. I mean, Kentucky's inexperienced. We'll see what kind of team shows up, but watch out for the Bonnies. That's all I'm going to say.
Listen, we got Logan Westerman in the YouTube comment section. We're trying to get to some of you guys' comments. Obviously, we're off and rolling. By the way, he says your Darth Vader sticker is awesome.
Is it? Yeah. You know what? My wife got me this. This was a stocking stuffer, and I highly recommend it for any Star Wars fan. I get more compliments on it. I get a lot of compliments on that. Moving on to number 3. I think this is a very interesting discussion. Christian Fulton, defensive back, 2016, Louisiana State. Known for their defensive backs. This guy was the #1 defensive back coming out of high school in the state of Louisiana, which is saying something, right? And he fails a drug test. But not only does he fail a drug test, he gets caught.
He's like a step further.
Right, he's like, I'm going to be dirty. I'm going to be dirty. What was the old wives' tale? A drop of Visine?
I don't know that one.
Yeah, you put a drop of, somebody out there has heard me. You can hit me up in the comments. But there are ways to skew the test. I'm not exactly sure what he did, but he got caught doing it.
Yeah.
And so the problem with this is that in the NCAA guideline book, it's 1 year suspension from the time of your positive test. From that day, 365 days, and another 365 days for messing with the test. So a 2-year, unprecedented. I don't know that this has ever happened before. But one thing I will say, Mike, is that the NCAA does not monkey around when it comes to what's in the book. Now, the book is ridiculous, but if it's in the book, there's really no wiggle room.
There's not a lot of wiggle room, and I think actually we have some sound from Barrett Slee on his Smothered and Covered podcast. Actually, he touches on this, and he is not happy with the SEC and the NCAA about this 2-year ban. Here he is right here.
If you try to fake a drug test and you get caught, you're an idiot. But does that mean he should be suspended for 2 years for essentially the same thing when, depending on the specifics of the substance in question, a lot of schools' policies don't even offer a suspension on the first and some even on the second failed drug test. And you're going to suspend him for 2 years? Look, I get it. He messed up. If he tried to falsify his drug sample, he deserves to be punished rather severely. I think a year is good enough.
Listen, I understand this, and I actually when I look at this Christian Fulton situation, I really feel bad for him. I feel bad for what he's going through. But listen, man, tampering with drugs, and Cliff Nelson says it in the comment section, listen, messing with a drug sample is not a good look, period. And Adi Rios says, I think it's not enough. They have to make him an example. And I tend to agree with that. I understand what Barrett Slee's saying. Listen, I think Bruce Feldman went the same route. A couple of other people have actually written on this topic. It gets kind of highlighted because LSU is so thin in the secondary this coming up year. But I don't know how you don't give 2 years. It's like, for everybody moving forward that knows they're going to fail a test, I say, well, I might as well take a shot at this thing. If I'm going to get a year either way, I might as well try to fake this. And, there's a ton of different ways that you can obviously talk about guys trying to do that.
Right.
I think 2 years is perfect. I hate to say it for Christian Fulton. I understand where some LSU fans are coming from, but Cliff Nelson's a great LSU fan in the comment section, and even he says, listen, you got to give this guy 2 years, period.
You got to hang an idiot, or you got to hang a village idiot, right? You got to hang him in the middle for everybody to look at. It sucks. It's got to be one guy, but he's the one that did it, and say, look, if you do this, first of all, don't be dirty because you're going to be out a year. Yeah. And secondarily, if you mess with the screening of the test, 2 years, that's it. There's no wiggle room here. And I go back to the NCAA's inflexibility on this with Colton Houston. Do you remember Colton Houston, the offensive lineman for Georgia? Played there for 25 years.
I don't know if I remember.
This guy had shoulder surgery when he was a kid. And they injected him with steroids. And it got stuck in his fatty tissue, and he could never pass a drug test.
Right.
So he couldn't play. They knew what it was for. Yeah. Doctors knew what it was for, but it was in the little book that if you couldn't pass a test, you couldn't play. If you're not going to let him play, this kid doesn't have a chance.
I mean, stories like that make me sick, man.
Right.
Because I've seen the work that's been put in. I do remember Colton Houston now that you bring up the story and we talk about it. Was last year his senior year or the year before last? Might have been
I lose track. When you're there for 45 years, it's hard to keep track of,
red shirt, 6 years trying to pass a drug test, over there trying to pass for steroids. But I think this gets highlighted. And listen, Christian Fulton's family has actually lawyered up. I think they've hired Don Jackson out of Alabama who deals with a lot of these deals with the NCAA. He actually takes them to court over a lot of issues like this. But I don't know what his arguing point is. Is this too severe? Are they going to try to tell me that maybe he didn't tamper with it? I don't believe that. Listen, if your sample's dirty enough, that's one strike against you. I don't know how you can overrule that in some kind of court setting. So, like I said, stinks for Chris. For Chris Jenkins. I think you obviously try to do everything you can to understand why they've lawyered up. But I don't know what the argument is. What's the argument going to be when you get into court and you say, boy, you know what? It really shouldn't be this hard. Listen, you knew the rules going in. Argue about the rules all you want to afterwards, but you knew the rules going in, and you knew what was going to happen to you. Number one, if you failed a test. Number two, if you tampered with it. That's NCAA 101. We learned that the first year I was on campus at Alabama. You don't fail a drug test, and you never tamper with those guys that come in and hand out those NCAA deals. They will come down on you very harshly.
Are they just recruiting defensive backs that like to get high in Baton Rouge? I mean, is it like mandatory that you have to smoke the weed to be play in the secondary?
I don't think Baton Rouge is the only place.
I know,
we've seen some of these. Listen, Antonio Callaway last year at Florida, obviously a ton of troubles with marijuana. We've seen guys at Alabama that have had the problems. Natrez Patrick over at Georgia right after the SEC championship game, getting pulled over, has the marijuana on him. We saw the video of that. He's saying, "Listen, you're going to ruin my career and my life." It just seems to be an ongoing problem, and I feel like, obviously, society as a whole seems to be getting more and more lax about marijuana, but the NCAA is not. They have not changed their position.
They're not lax about much.
They have not changed their position on anything here recently. Definitely not paying players. Definitely not, going down that route. So nothing's changed in terms of the marijuana test either. And it just, like I said, it's unfortunate. It's been highlighted because obviously you had a couple of DBs flip from LSU on signing day. You have him who's going to not be eligible this coming up year. They've had guys they're trying to get in transfers right now. They're going to be extremely thin in the secondary. So it highlights it because this is a 5-star player. This is a big time piece of what LSU is trying to do. But he's certainly not the first kid to ever fail a drug test, and probably not the first one to ever tamper with it. Listen, 2 years is the minimum for me when we're talking about the things that he was allegedly trying to do.
I'm glad you brought up Callaway. That's a nice segue to our next topic here, number 4. Felipe Franks named team captain by his teammates. Dan Mullen, of course, they've been working out like crazy, getting up at 6 in the morning, getting the academics, squared away where they need to be, and he was a guy. Position probably had something to do with it because you don't have a lot of experience there. And I'll ask you about having a quarterback as a captain in just a second. But, I think that Coach Mullen, as far as breeding this competition, starting where he is, and giving this opportunity to the teammates to decide who the team captains are going to be, I think it's great. I think it's a great thing to get the season started.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of guys are still commenting here in the comment section on the last topic. Shannon Burgess, a great LSU fan. I think it's fair as long as they stay consistent with the punishment if others violate. Audi Rio says he should have come forward and confessed and deal with this very often, and his punishment would have been less severe. Cliff Nelson doesn't like that you threw Baton Rouge and the LSU secondary under the bus by saying
no, nothing on the bus.
He said, slow down, Hans.
No, Honey Badger, Jalen Collins. I'm just saying, like, this is a theme here.
Yeah,
same position.
And listen, Dan Riggins is commenting on Felipe Franks, says, team captain of Forest Spring. Let me explain what's going on down in Florida right now. What they did is they voted on 8 team captains to be put in place for the calendar year of 2018. Right. And what happens is this: these guys, and I actually love this. I think this is great from Dan Mullen. I've never heard of this, happening. Apologies if this is happening at some other school that I haven't actually heard of it happening at. Dan Mullen has 8 captains voted on by the team, and those captains actually draft players that they're going to watch out over. They're going to draft, like, that guy's going to keep his nose clean. I want him on my team. And so at the end of each month,
Christian Fulton would not have been a first-round pick.
Yeah, he might have been one of the last picks on your team. Listen, Antonio Callaway would have been the same way. Felipe Franks would be like, I don't want that guy on my team. But yeah, I think it's cool because, listen, it enforces leadership, enforces accountability from teammates. And at the end of each month, the guys that are in first place, the team that's in first place, you get to go out to dinner. You get like a steak dinner and some of these other things. The guys that are in last place have to go like read to elementary schoolers. And I think this is such a
And they're happy to do it.
Yeah, they're happy to do it.
Right.
And it just, listen, it stinks that, obviously, something went wrong during the month, but you're being held accountable and you're having a light punishment. I think everybody really at the end is developing some sort of team chemistry. I love this from Dan Mullen. I think this is,
I do too.
I wish this policy was in place everywhere. I mean, there's leadership councils at every school. I think, these days, I know definitely that Kirby Smart, I know definitely that Nick Saban does it. I think Ed Orgeron does a similar thing with these leadership councils. But this ability to draft teammates,
right?
We just did it really position room by position room. The senior offensive lineman, really, he takes care of the offensive lineman. The senior defensive lineman takes care of the defensive lineman. But this ability to draft teammates, really kind of reach across the party lines in these locker rooms. An offensive lineman's going to draft that nice guy defensive lineman. Hey, listen, I want that guy on my team. I want to be able to go to dinner at the end of the month. I think it's an incredible program. I really got to give kudos to Dan Mullen on this.
You're competing.
Yes.
Right? You're breeding competition. You're intermingling the positions, which is something that the Atlanta Falcons head coach Dan Quinn emphasizes, as far as in the locker room, positioning guys next to guys that they normally wouldn't be around. But a couple things that I want to get to in this. We'll talk about the quarterback situation in itself, but what about the idea of, do you have to have a quarterback as a captain? He's a sophomore, doesn't have a ton of experience. He's by far the youngest guy that was given this opportunity.
Right.
I feel like, what is Dan Mullen communicating to him by allowing his teammates to vote him into this position?
Right, and Hardwired. I don't know your real name, but I'm just going to keep calling you Hardwired here in the YouTube section. He brings up a good point. I think it's a confidence, but he says it's a confidence builder, allowing him to be in that position, and he is, I guess, the elder statesman there in the quarterback room. So that makes a little bit of sense. But when you name off the other guys, I got the list right here: Martez Ivey, believe he's a senior; Chauncey Gardner, David Reese, Josh Hammond, C.C. Jefferson, Keontae Lewis, and R.J. Raymond. All those guys are like juniors and seniors. I mean, so Felipe Franks really is an outlier when you talk about a redshirt sophomore, but he's been around the program. A lot of people are going to look at the quarterback position as a leader. When you talk about team captains at other places, I can't remember the last time a quarterback was not voted a team captain in Alabama. So, but usually that's done after the year. I think the fact that this is a 2018 thing and not just a 2018 season thing, I think it leads me to believe that this is a little bit of a confidence builder. Hey, Felipe, we need to be a part of this program. If Emory Jones or somebody else wins the job, hey, Felipe, you can't leave your team. Listen, you're one of the captains. You're not going to walk out on those guys. So I'm not sure how the captain thing is really done at Florida in the long term. Like if they, at Alabama, they put the handprints in the concrete and things like that. But voted on these 8 captains, I understand why Felipe Franks is that role, and I agree with Hardwired. I think this is a confidence builder from Dan Mullen saying, hey, listen, let's make sure this guy gets voted in there. And obviously he wasn't talking to the players. The players voted him in that piece. But I think it says a lot about what Felipe Franks' standing is with not only this team but the coaching staff.
Yeah, you're not going to give it to Jake Allen, right?
Right.
You're not going to give it to Emory Jones, even though he's there a little bit early. And let's just say, for argument's sakes, Allen gets the backup job.
Right.
Do you redshirt Emory Jones? Do you just say, I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Boy, that's a great question. And we talked a little bit this week and a little bit last week about maybe the possibility of playing both those guys, playing Felipe Franks and Emory Jones. Do you pull that Chris Leak, Tim Tebow role that Dan Mullen obviously has dealt with in the past? I got to think, though, I mean, you Florida Gators fans in the comment section can tell me if I'm wrong about this. I got to feel like it's a huge letdown for a lot of Gators fans if Emory Jones is redshirted this year. I mean, maybe you feel good about what Allen is. Maybe Kyle Trask sneaks around and makes his way into that backup role. Maybe I can see that happening, but I just have to feel like if you're pointing to Dan Mullen's offense and you really need that ability to kind of run around, I don't know what this offensive line should be good this year. They should have been good last year and they weren't that great.
Right.
I feel like at some point Emory Jones has to hit the field, or for Gators fans, boy, you're going to have a little bit of a palms up going on. What's going on?
I mean, isn't it, the decision's obviously going to come from the head coach. It's his first year. It's going to be his biggest decision that he's made up until this point. Aren't you communicating to your fan base one way or the other how you make that decision? Well, we're going one toe in this year. Next year's going to be the year.
Right.
Next year's going to be the year. Yeah. We're not really going in, but in the long run, it might be the best thing for the young man and for the program.
Yeah. That's really been my position all along. Ever since Emory Jones signed on the dotted line before, I'm sitting there going, listen, if in the end Emory Jones is what you want in a quarterback at Florida, I know his accuracy, he needs to be built up, but that's what Dan Mullen's for, right?
He's early enrolling.
That's what Dan Mullen's for. Dan Mullen is has been brought in to develop a quarterback. So if in the end Emory Jones you think he's going to be the guy next year, get him on the field this year. This is kind of a throwaway year for Dan Mullen. You go ahead and get Emory Jones on the field. I do like the idea, and we did talk about this, I think, with Matt Stewart early in the week. I do like the idea of a two-quarterback system there. I usually hate the idea of two-quarterback systems.
Right.
I said it the other day. Bobby Bowden brought up the point that if you have two quarterbacks, usually you don't have one, so nobody's really taking the bull by the horns. But I think for this football team, it works. I think you bring in Emory Jones on those third down and shorts, you get the extra. It's just like Kadarius Toney did last year in the Wildcat. You get that extra blocker on some of these things. Emory Jones has the passing threat, but Felipe Franks obviously has more of the arm talent on the first and second downs.
But a vote of confidence from the head coach.
Yeah.
New team captain, and if he was down in the dumps about his performance last year, he's got to be feeling new leaf.
Yeah.
His coach gave him a new slate. Go paint it.
And everybody in the comment section seems to have something to say about this, too. Hardwire says, no red shirt. No. And TJ Martin says, let the best man win. Hashtag Go Gators. I understand that, too. And I think Felipe Franks, I think where the argument comes from is I think Felipe Franks will probably be the best man when fall camp comes to a close. Get me to November. Get me to, after the reps that Emory Jones could have this year. At the end of the year, is he still the best option for the Gators?
2 years ago, all we were hearing about was Felipe Franks.
And
all of a sudden they're writing him off. He completed the Hail Mary. Everybody's like, oh my God, he's here. And now all of a sudden it's like, no, we don't want him.
Listen, we had a topic yesterday. Felipe Franks comes out in the press conference and says, boy, I've hit rock bottom. Doesn't get any lower than this. I can only go up from here. My argument was, I don't know if you've hit rock bottom, Felipe Franks. It could definitely get worse. You could definitely go into this year. Obviously, he got benched twice last year in two different situations, but you could go into this year and it could be even worse, and you could see Felipe Franks move on somewhere. I don't think that's going to happen. If I had to put money on it, I think Emory Jones should play a lot early and often, but if I had to put money on it, I would think Felipe Franks would be the starting quarterback come September.
Number 5, scary moment here. We actually have some pictures of an automobile accident involving an Auburn defensive lineman. And I mean, what can you say about this guy? Dontavius Russell could have gone to the NFL, decided to stay in college to be a part of Kevin Steele's defense next year. And look at this. I mean, this is scary.
Yeah, no, I think it's tough. And when you talk about teammates, when you talk about situations like this, listen. We had a teammate when I was going into the opener my senior year against Virginia Tech. We had a teammate, Brandon Dedrick, who was shot. He was shot through the forearm in a carjacking attempt at landing his hip. We talk about a bad feeling in the pit of your stomach. And any of you who have had relatives that have gone through car accidents, when I first saw this picture, it made me sick to my stomach. And he mentions it in his post, boy, when his brother, had to learn how to walk again, had to go through rehabilitation after a bad car accident. This is one of those things that's never a good situation. I got to be telling you, the Auburn fans, I'm sure, feel this way. And just as a person, I look at this guy and I think, man, you are lucky to walk away from an incident like that. I think he said he dislocated his thumb. But for me, football is completely secondary to how scary those pictures are. I mean, there's not really a way to spin this story for us other than to say, boy, we're just glad Dontavius Russell is okay, and we're glad that he'll be joining that Auburn football team again very soon. That could have been a lot worse than it ended up being.
Life is too precious, and you think about Philip Litzenkirchen just a few years back.
Yeah.
Somebody in the Auburn family, happened just like that. We have a guy that works here with us, does amazing work, who got in a car accident going home a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And, it just takes 1 second. But, he and Derek Brown, in the middle of that Auburn defense,
Yep.
they're going to be fine. They're going to be healthy. And you got to think interior-wise, that's going to be one of the toughest duos in the nation.
Marlon Davidson, add him. Nick
Right.
Coe right there rushing the passer. I think when you look at what they have, and obviously losing Jeff Holland is going to be a big deal for that Auburn defense, but I just love the fact that Kevin Steele is back in position as the defensive coordinator for Auburn. I think when you talk about the weapons that he had, and we just named a few of them, you look at a little bit of that linebacking core, obviously some pieces to put back in place, back in the secondary with both of those safeties missing from last year, Stephen Roberts being one of those guys. But, boy, they've got the pieces in place. Yeah. I mean, this is an Auburn football team that if you can piece a line together, an offensive line together, we're going to get into that later about J.B. Grimes and some of the comments that he's obviously made to some of his players. But if you can piece the offensive line together, Cam Martin, obviously we talked about maybe Asa Martin not playing, but the talent is going to be there. And I think they're going to have talent on the offensive line. They missed out on Calvin Anderson, but Calvin Ashley, a guy who's probably going to plug in at right tackle, is a 5-star guy. So you look at that football team, and you look at some of the things shaping up around Gus Malzahn, they can definitely get this football team to the next level, and I think it starts on this defense line, and Dontavius Russell has to be incredibly happy that he's going to be around to be a part of that after looking at that accident.
Some booster's going to be upset that his car got wrecked, though.
Oh, I don't know if you're allowed to say that. I don't know if we're allowed to say
come
that.
on. It's a joke. It's a shameless joke. Yeah, I'm kidding. It just looked like a nice car. That's all.
Yeah, listen, I'm not
Speaking of nice things, you could have nice things if you win some money from my bookie.
Yeah, listen, you guys know me. I'm a gambler. We've been talking about my bookie all week, and you can win a boatload of money. Everybody's got the March Madness. Everybody's got the fever. You can lay down some money and score big on college hoops. Join me and thousands of online players and start betting at mybookie.ag. Are you sick and tired of getting the runaround? As you ask for a payout, come join MyBookie today. Enter the promo code SECLIVE. That's SECLIVE. Visit mybookie.ag today. Play, win, and get paid. And a lot of you guys are commenting right now about YouTube page, Facebook page. We've had a little bit of square off. We've got comments coming on both. Listen, you're also getting some comments from Dan Riggins. He says, this Hans guy is funny.
Thanks, Dan. I'm not getting those comments on my Facebook, by the way.
My guy. Yeah, you got. What do you got over there? You got anybody chiming in?
Listen, I got Teresa Stewart. She's a sweet, sweet lady. We've been going back and forth. And she's a huge Tennessee fan, and we're going to talk some Jeremy Pruitt for her right now.
Oh, man, I can't wait. Jeremy Pruitt's one of my boys. I'm just telling you all right now, I'm hopping on the hype train for him coming
So let's
forward.
the heck with what it says here as far as being 2 years. Right off the bat, Jeremy Pruitt. Got to see him a little bit at Georgia. Didn't really talk to the media much.
Yeah,
Didn't get many warm and fuzzies from him. But from a football coach standpoint, recruiting, leadership, respect from his other coaches. Tell me a little bit about Coach Pruitt.
He's hard nosed. I mean, it's old school is the best way I can say it. And actually, one of our points yesterday was about how they asked him if he was going to go back to the Butch Jones style of spring game where you get 1 point in the circle of life drill if one team wins or one team wins. And then the final score of this thing, with these point systems based off drills, the final score last year was like 129 to 110 or something like that. Jeremy Pruitt gets in front of the podium and he's like, listen, the way we've always done it is the one defense plays the one offense and the two defense plays the two defense, and we put them on teams and we go out there and play a football game. And I thought it was funny, and that just, to me, that's such a great insight to Jeremy Pruitt. That is like his no-nonsense approach. This is old school. The game hasn't changed. You try to get the football into the end zone, and the other team tries to stop them. You want to end every drive with some kind of kick, either a punt or an extra point. It's going to be old school. I think it's going to be interesting to see the fact that he brings in Tyson Hilton, and they want to go pro-style offense. They brought over Keller Crisp. We talked about Mondre London earlier this week, the Michigan State grad transfer running back. They've got to rebuild an offensive line. Is Trey Smith going to be healthy? Nobody really knows about that. But he is such a no-nonsense guy. He's not going to play the game. This is not going to be – I'm not going to beat around the bush about what my team's doing. If we suck, he's going to say we suck.
Yeah,
and I think that is really, really going to be refreshing for a ton of the Tennessee fans out there. I think that they're so tired of hearing – but we're champions of life and we recruit five-star hearts. And they've been, drugged through everything with Derek Dooley and Lane Kiffin. I think this is going to be a breath of fresh air. I think he is a perfect fit. And it pains me to say that because Jeremy Pruitt is an Alabama letterman.
Right.
He's from the state of Alabama. But it does pain me to say that I think he is as perfect as it fits for the timing up there in Knoxville right now.
But the good thing he's got going for him is that the bar has been set extremely low.
Yeah, and it
really has.
And that's actually part of the topic right now. Can we get the graphic right now from who actually says this? This is Josh. Who has that quote, Michael?
I got it right here. It's from Blake Morgan.
Blake Morgan.
You bet.
Okay, and he writes this article, and he's asked the question, how long until Jeremy Pruitt gets a turn around? He has a couple of good quotes in here. A coach's second season at the helm of a program typically provides enough signs that indicate whether things are going to work out. Alabama coach Nick Saban went 12-2 in year 2. Kirby Smart proved all the doubt wrongs, went 13-2. Gus Malzahn had 20 wins by the end of his second season. Dan Mullen won 9 games. And then he goes on to say, with the expectation that 2018 will be a rebuilding effort, I think 2019 is when we'll find out about the direction of Pruitt's tenure. There's enough young talent and momentum to be had on the recruiting trail to expect a leap in production in Pruitt's second year. And my question, actually, to flip around and throw this thing on you, is that fair? Is it fair enough to ask Jeremy Pruitt in year 2 to expect some kind of a crazy turnaround and point to Kirby Smart and say, boy, if he went 13-2, maybe Jeremy Pruitt should go 13-2.
Look at what Kirby Smart inherited.
Exactly.
There's 5 guys that BA's down there with right now. They're going to be playing on Sundays. Mark Richt had an incredible recruiting class. What has to be done,
recruiting was never part of Mark Richt's problem.
No.
The talent has always been at Georgia.
Right. So the problem, with Tennessee has so far to come. When I watch them, I mean, you lost to Vanderbilt. You went 0-8 in conference.
0-8 in the SEC.
You're starting from scratch. And when I'm telling you it's an uphill battle, brother, it's an uphill battle. You open with West Virginia, you got a couple cupcakes in there, and then the onslaught comes. I mean, it's Georgia, Auburn, Alabama. I mean, you could be 2-7. Where is it? I got it right here. Tennessee could be 2-7. West Virginia, East Tennessee State, UTEP. I didn't even know they still play football down there. Florida, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama. That's 2-7. But here's the good news and what's interesting about year 2. You end the season against Charlotte, Kentucky, Mizzou, Vanderbilt.
You should be able to run the table.
Right. And that's a lot of momentum going into recruiting, going into that next year. So if what Blake is saying is true and it's fair to judge him by that, you have a chance, an opportunity to finish up this season strong and carry some momentum. And I think with the schedule, the way it starts out, that's all you can really ask for.
Yeah, and listen, I think Jeremy Pettis, I'm over on the Facebook page now, he kind of says it all. He says, LOL, Vols. And listen, Teresa Stewart, you mentioned it, Terry Crews is chiming in on Butch Jones being in the Bama rehab program, but Teresa Stewart says, listen, we'll get back there, go Vols. And I think that's how a lot of Tennessee fans feel. I think it's just the timing that I make the argument about. It's just, listen, development was the problem under Mike Shula at Alabama. Recruiting was not the issue for Mark Richt. I think that when you get these coaches and they hit the ground running in these perfect scenarios, and I think the Gus Malzahn stat's a little bit loaded too because they had an incredibly talented team at Auburn when he got there. All he had to do was flip the switch and get the offense moving in the right direction, and they ended up being great and obviously made that national championship game run in 2013.
Will Muschamp, his second year, went 11-2, and then how'd that end up?
Not very good. Right. And I think you have to look at both sides of the coin here when you talk about some of these coaching changes. I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair of anybody. And I understand what Blake Morgan's saying. You kind of look at where the benchmark is. But my point about this, it's record aside. And I've told BA a ton of times, they have to look like a good football team. You have to win the games you're supposed to win. And you just mentioned some of them. You have to start beating Vanderbilt. You have to start beating Kentucky. You don't have to win 10 games if you're Jeremy Pruitt in year 2. You have to win the games you're supposed to win. It's going to be tough to beat Georgia coming up. I think Florida's going to be a ton better. South Carolina's growing in the right direction. Alabama is obviously Tennessee's crossover game every year. So you're not going to tell me that those are going to be easy games and Tennessee's going to go out and win them next year. But win the games you're supposed to, and I think that's really what will be the benchmark next year to see if Jeremy Pruitt's headed in the right direction.
Number 7 today, running backs at LSU, always loaded at that position. I mean, you look at Leonard Fournette, obviously Darius Geis last year. He's supposed to be a top 15, possibly a top 20 pick in this year's draft. Now, this year the problem is they're very green at that position.
Yes, they are.
What do they have? Something like 50 total carries of an experience of their running backs coming in?
Yeah, and I think the interesting dynamic for this topic for me is the fact that we have heard from Ed Orgeron and we've heard from Steve Ensminger, and me and Brandon Adams have pointed out the wide receiver core, all the talent you have at wide receiver. The Terrace Marshalls, Jamar Chase, some of the guys, obviously Stephen Sullivan, some of the guys you're bringing back off last year's team. We talked yesterday about Jonathan Giles is going to wear the new number 7 for LSU. This is the transfer from Texas Tech. So much talent out wide, and I think that really we've been sold on the fact that they're going to be a pass-happy team because of the wide receivers, but I think this quote from Ed Orgeron right here actually gives you a little bit of insight into how he feels. Until we find a featured back, the offense will not be featured by a running back. We're going to throw the football. And that simple quote to me sheds a little bit of light on maybe why they're turning into, because you look at LSU, you think running backs, obviously, and I'm sure Cliff Nelson's in this comment section saying somewhere that LSU is RBU, and they've had a ton of good ones. But I wonder if we're seeing this throwing game being thrown out there and everybody pointing to the wide receivers, because you don't yet know what you have in Nick Brissett or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I was on Clyde Edwards-Helaire's bandwagon last year. Obviously, he follows in those Darius guys' footsteps. But he's one of those guys that I don't think had as much impact as I thought he would there in year one. And Darius guys there, everything's a little bit skewed. But I think that comment from Ed Orgeron lets you know really what they feel like they have at the running back position. And right now, they don't have that one guy head and shoulders above the other one. Leonard Fournette's another guy that's going to be, a possible option there as the third running back. But I don't think we're going to see the LSU offense of yesteryear. And I don't know if that's by design so much as it is just lack of options back behind the line of scrimmage.
All I know, if I'm an LSU fan and I see Ed Orgeron talking about the offense, I immediately go watch game tape of Troy. Yeah. No, I mean, because that's the last time he interfered in the offense.
Yeah, and listen.
Leave it alone.
That's kind of for me, and we've talked a ton on the show about Matt Canada, and I'm on Ed Orgeron's side of this whole Matt Canada saga. Matt Canada has been at, I can't remember what the number is, seven different programs in 9 years or something something crazy like that. So I fall on Ed Orgeron's side of that. But I think when we look forward, and Ed Orgeron's going to make the case that, listen, we got all these talented wideouts and we want to air it out. We don't want to be stuck in the past. Maybe it's not by design, though, is my point. Maybe this is, this is Ed Orgeron saying, listen, we don't have anybody back there that we feel really good about the running back position. I don't know that. I'm still on board with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I know a ton of the LSU fans bring that guy up in the comment section a ton. I think the ceiling is there for him. But is he ready to be the feature back? Is Nick Brissett ready to be the feature back?
Keyword was feature, right?
It really was.
20-plus carries, right?
Yeah.
That's what you think, 15, 20 carries?
Right. And the running backs they've had there are such bruisers. When you talk about Leonard Fournette and Darius guys, two different style running backs. Mm-hmm. Downhill, those were not just feature backs, legendary feature backs. Legendary SEC backs. And I think it's tough, as a guy, for me that obviously used to wear the uniform, it's tough to get up here and kind of compare a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Nick Brissett to those guys that were just legendary. Listen, it's not their fault that those two guys came before them. I'm sure that, they're very good in their own right. But I think it is interesting to look at the LSU offense as a whole. What do you have on the offensive line? Not so sure just yet. You have great, obviously skill players at wide receiver position. It's just not there right now, in my opinion. They're going to have to show me going into the season that they have those guys to be able to really take those 25 carries a game like Darius guys and Leonard Fournette did. I just think it's curious that Ed Orgeron says that, and I don't know that this offensive change is going to be by design in his eyes.
It's just the unknown.
It really is.
At this point, you don't know what these guys got. You have tremendously big shoes to fill.
Right.
And to me, it's rich people problems, right? It's like the guy with the Mercedes complaining about a $1,500 oil change.
Yeah.
Look at what you've had there before. I mean, it's like, I'm sure these guys are going to be okay. He's just trying to motivate somebody. He wants somebody to take the job and run off with it. No pun intended.
And listen, Cliff Nelson brings up Chris Curry in the comment section. He says Curry's the next bruiser coming through. I think he's a summer enrollee. I don't think he's on campus yet. So, hey, listen, I don't think it's completely impossible that a guy shows up in the summer and maybe becomes your feature back. But boy, you're asking a lot of a guy when you seemingly have some options there. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys. Oh, Tay Pruvens. Also, I think he's a freshman coming in this year. I think he just got to school. If you're going to tell me that Chris Curry is really the next bruiser coming through, it's even worse than Nick Brissett and Clyde Edwards-Helaire not showing us yet. Chris Curry's not even on campus. I mean, if this is going to be the next bruiser, then, boy, he's got a lot of work to do in the fall.
J.B. Grimes, offensive line coach at Auburn, was there back 13, 14, and 15. He's been coaching basketball at UConn and Cincinnati the last couple of years, but he's back now.
Yes.
He's back now, and I would think any specialized coach, first thing they want to do other than meeting your players, you want to look at some game tape, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
Looked at some of the players last year, and I thought it was interesting because I think the concept of where they were last year with Coach Hand, at least the article says that he wanted those guys to be versatile.
Right.
He wanted guys to be able to play tackle, guard, slide wherever, and it helped them out last year because they had so many injuries.
Yes, it did.
This guy doesn't want any part of that. He wants you to own your real estate, specialize in what you do. I understand both, but you're the guy who did it. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the different dynamic with these guys. And J.B. Grimes is so detail-oriented. And I think Gus Malzahn has said it a ton since J.B. Grimes has come back on board. It only took Gus Malzahn 24 hours to find his replacement for Herb Hand when Herb Hand left and went to Texas.
He's up in UConn. He said, you want me to come back? Oh, absolutely. I'm on my way.
I'm on my way to the plains right now. Well, I'm flying into that Auburn airport right there over the, over I-65 right now, coming in hot. And so I think that says a lot about what Gus Malzahn thinks of J.B. Grimes. I think the quote we have here is actually from Mike Horton talking about what J.B. Grimes told them coming into the season. And he was kind of critical of what he saw on tape last year. He was like, okay, this is what we were terrible at, and this is what we need to get better at. Coach Grimes really loves the details. he focuses on that, and he felt like we weren't really detail-oriented last year. That's from Mike Horton yesterday after practice. And I guess my question for you is it smart of J.B. Grimes to talk to his offensive line about what Herb Hand was doing in there? To me, that's a little bit of a crossover. I mean,
but he knows some of these guys because they're holdovers. He knew them when they were
He definitely knows a couple of these guys, and that definitely opens it up. But I think Dan Mullen has been a guy that's taken over Florida, and he's saying, listen, I don't want to watch too much film. I don't want to know a ton about these guys. I want them to have a clean slate.
Interesting.
Do you think that J.B. Grimes might be overstepping his boundary by going back and dissecting every snap from last year in Herb Hand?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if J.B. Grimes, I don't know his relationships with the players, but I'm just telling you, if I was in those shoes,
right,
I'd say, listen, we weren't being coached the same way we were this year. J.B. Grimes and Herb Hand have two different ways of looking at things, and I think that's what makes it difficult for me as a former player to kind of look at that and read through those and say, well, are you really going to go back and watch last year? You weren't here. Right. You don't know what you were talking about. So,
well, I mean, let me just ask you a question. I mean, you're playing, a guy next to you gets hurt, right?
Right.
You've been cross-trained at guard. You can slide over. Who knows what doors that might open for you in a professional career. But, I mean, do you see it both ways as far as being versatile or specializing in one area?
I love the versatility, I think, but it has to stop at some point for me. I think right now is where you work on the versatility. You're in spring. Listen, you cross-train. I can tell you right now, we played Mississippi State in 2007. We actually lost the game at Starkville. We're in the middle of a 2-minute drive. Our right tackle dislocates his shoulder. Mike, you're playing right guard. Go out in 2-minute drive and block all these rush ins out there when we have 45 seconds on the clock. I'm sitting there going, are you serious? I'm going back out there right now.
You're thinking back to spring.
Yeah, it was like a zero nose guard. The zero nose guard rushing the center. I'm a guard just kind of sliding out doing one of these things, shuffling side to side. All of a sudden, get out there and block Titus Brown here on 3rd and 15. That should be really fun. On the silent count, by the way, while everybody's shaking the cowbell. So I think spring is when you do it. But I think when the calendar starts turning to summer, and when you start talking about fall, and you start talking about training camp, you start getting into that, I want those players entrenched where they are. I want the communication to be there. Listen, I want to know what my left tackle's thinking. I want to know what my center's thinking. I want to know what both guys all around me are thinking. I don't want to have the guessing game, because this is what happens. This is a little bit of insight into offensive line play. This is what happens. You get in the film room and you say, man, when that guy walks out to the left a little bit, when he's a yard over, let's make sure we're double teaming and pushing that way and not that way. Let's make sure when this stretch play is called that you can get off. And listen, I'll kind of shove you. I'll put my hand on your back a little bit and give you a shove if I have to. Let's make sure we get hip to hip and drive vertical on this power play. And make sure you watch for that run through underneath. Well, then all of a sudden somebody gets injured. And there's somebody that comes in that hasn't been doing that. Right. And so I think that communication is such a big deal, but you have to have the cross-training for those scenarios, but that communication is such a big deal to me that I feel like once fall camp gets in, you almost have to lock it down. So I think it's interesting what J.B. Grimes is doing. I think it's necessary, but I'm not a huge fan as we start to move along that this thing starts to happen in that direction.
Tennessee wide receiver Lance Wilhoit, one of the top receivers in the country next year. Some interesting comments as far as how he was recruited first by Butch Jones and now how he's being recruited by Jeremy Pruitt.
Yeah.
And the two different, if you're a Tennessee fan, it kind of helps make sense. Not only what was happening.
I was saying, boy, a lot of stuff is starting to fall into place
Not only, you got guys with the trash can and the champion of life and that whole nonsense, and then the performance on the field and just all that, but it goes all the way back to recruiting.
Yeah.
Where you got one of the top receivers in all the nation in your own backyard, and he doesn't even have a relationship with Coach Jones in the University of Tennessee. How does that happen?
Yeah, it's definitely a head scratch for me too, reading this article that obviously was on SEC Country, and Will Hoyt tries to explain what he thought about Butch Jones' staff, and he doesn't hold back. Listen, I guess you're supposed to get a certain feeling from a coach because you're an in-state player, knowing that school is behind you 100%, whether you go to that school or not. I just didn't feel that from them throughout my whole recruitment process. They offered me my freshman year. After that, they didn't really talk to me my freshman, sophomore, or junior year. Now it's his senior year coming up, and Jeremy Pruitt's in line. I think you see through the article, obviously, there on SECCountry.com, and the Tennessee writers do a good job. You can see that things are starting to change. He's like, boy, Jeremy Pruitt's my boy. He even says, we can chop it up. Now, I'm not up with the hip lingo, but chop it up to me says, man, we had a good relationship. Right. We can really talk about things off the field. And it becomes very apparent to me why Butch Jones struggled at times. And Butch Jones didn't struggle a ton in recruiting. I mean, he was top 15 classes. He definitely brought in some ton of talent. He was able to land Trey Smith, the #1 offensive lineman in the country last year. But this is a little bit introspective to me about the difference that Tennessee's recruits are about to see. I think this should get Tennessee fans. Teresa Stewart, if you're still watching, you should be excited about this part of what we're talking about Jeremy Pruitt, because the relationship's there. And I think that the in-state people, and we've featured Jeremy Pruitt on here a couple of times, talking in Memphis, talking in Nashville, talking in Chattanooga, saying this is our state. It's time to start putting up a fence around it. It's time to start bringing in these in-state recruits, and it starts with a guy like Will Hoyt.
And you know what? That's an easy conversation to have.
It is.
Because you're not making excuses for anybody. You just get on the phone and say, look, I have no idea what was going on before we got here. Listen, I want you as part of our team. They might not have wanted you. You have to be part of our team. Yeah. We're going to do something special here. You're going to be a part of this. You're from the state of Tennessee. I can't have you going to play for Ohio State or whatever else, whoever else is recruiting him. And you make him priority number one. Make him feel special. And I think he's getting that feeling so far from Coach Pruitt.
I think it's easy to look at that and also understand why a guy like Madre London's headed down from Michigan State, why Killer Chris is headed over from Stanford, because Jeremy Pruitt's able to sell that. And everybody that's talked about Jeremy Pruitt, every recruit or every grad transfer, everybody around the program has said, we really think he's building the right direction. Even the recruits that didn't pick Tennessee on signing day say, boy, I really like what Jeremy Pruitt's doing up there. I think that he's really at the ground level of this, something that's going to be big for Tennessee and up there in Knoxville. And the guys like Cade Mays that are now headed down to Georgia and Athens, those guys will eventually start landing and start listening to Jeremy Pruitt.
Right.
I think it's a big deal for them to land a guy like Will Hoyt. And right now, you got to look at his comments in this story and think, Tennessee's got to be the favorite to land his services. It's huge to start the groundwork. And all of a sudden, Will Hoyt can start telling his people, listen, this guy's getting it going in the right direction. Then all of a sudden you get a commitment on board. Then all of a sudden you start telling people at All-Star games, boy, Jeremy Pruitt's great. You know, I'm going up there to start something really special at Tennessee.
You know, all coaches are competitors.
Right.
You know, all coaches are competitors. They compete recruiting. They compete on the field. I think that what Coach Pruitt did is just throwing it all on the table, taking this job at Tennessee with the direction of Georgia, you know, the hiring of Mullen, Muschamp in South Carolina, and saying, you know what? I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna give it everything. I'm gonna give him hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It's got to be. If you're a Tennessee fan, things have been so bad, but you got a guy who was crazy enough to take that job.
Yeah.
And that he honestly believes he's going to get it turned around, and it looks like he's starting to get a little bit of momentum. He got a long way to go, but.
I got to tell you, man, I have a buddy of mine that coaches football down in Mobile, Alabama, and he called me and he's like, man, Jeremy Pruitt just rolled through here. I think he offered I'm not even joking here. I think he offered 15 guys in Mobile. It was like, hey, listen, I'm gonna hit the ground running. Let me just throw something at the wall, see who it sticks with, see who we can get up to Knoxville, see who can get on campus, see who can hand out committable offers to. And I love that strategy. If you're Tennessee, why not? We talked about this yesterday. I don't think the in-state talent at Tennessee right now is up to par with the state of Georgia, with the state of Florida. So if you're Jeremy Pruitt, you've got to go into some of these other states and start getting it. Tennessee's a big deal. You know, you should be landing, 10 players from the state of Tennessee every year to start that groundwork. But let's throw out some of these offers in other places. I think he did the same thing in Birmingham, going to Hewitt Trustville.
He's probably doing it all over the globe.
Throwing offers all over the places. And I love it from Jeremy Pruitt. This is what you're going to get if you're a Tennessee fan.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, really, I think that he's the right guy for the job.
I agree.
And to his credit, sometimes be careful what you ask for, but I think he's got it going in the right direction early on. Number 10 today, I want to talk a little bit about walk-ons. Cool story here. Your alma mater, of course. Young man walks on, and you see him signing the paper there. Alex Perriman.
Yeah, what's interesting about a guy like this, and he had offers from smaller schools, Birmingham Southern, I think Huntington College, a couple other colleges. And he just comes out and says, listen, I had the opportunity to do that, but I wanted to play at the highest level. And this kind of is a segue into talking about a little bit about walk-ons, because every school out there has guys like Alex Perriman. Every school out there has guys that show up on the scout team. Listen, when I was a junior in college, Rashad Johnson in Alabama, he was a walk-on. He ended up playing safety under Nick Saban. Went on to be a two-time All-American. Was a third-round draft pick of the Cardinals. Ended up playing 7 years in the NFL. There are guys like Alex Perriman that can make a difference at your school, and I know everybody out there has some kind of walk-on success story. There's Rudies all over the SEC, if you know what I mean. Alex Perriman's one of those guys.
Kevin Green, Clay Matthews, just to name a couple.
It's unbelievable, really, and my hat goes off to Alex Perriman for making the decision. He's going to pay his way in Alabama, and then he's going to show up, and probably for the first couple of years of his college career, get the crap beat out of him. I mean, that's what a lot of these guys are for. Their bodies for scout teams. He's got the preferred walk-on. That seems to be something that Alabama likes doing here recently. These preferred walk-on guys that really, he's 6 foot, 250. He's an offensive guard. Is he going to see the field? I don't know. Getting under Scott Cochran, I can definitely see him bulking up. Right. I can definitely see him doing good things. But I got to take my hats off of the kid, because we've seen stories like this. He just wants to play football at the highest level.
Right.
He wants to play at the University of Alabama. And schools like LSU have them. Schools like Georgia have them. All these big-time programs, this is really a foundation of what they have going on.
Do they get treated differently by teammates? Some of the guys? I mean, are they just one of the guys? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, a locker room setting for sure.
differently.
A locker room setting for sure. And what you have to understand is when you have guys on scout teams that are walk-ons, a lot of times they have to prepare differently. A lot of times when you're in meeting rooms, hey, scout team, let me grab you for a second. Let me show you this film of what the other offense is running.
And they understand that.
And they understand that. So there is some separation within the program where they don't always get treated the same. But listen, they're as beloved by their teammates as anybody. I still have friends that were walk-ons on our football team that I still talk to daily, that I still talk to all the time. Listen, linebackers that I butted head with, defensive linemen that I butted head with on a daily basis were some of the best people I knew. And Alex Perriman kind of fits into that bill. And I think that every school, like I said, every school's got guys like this that really lay the foundation.
And in a big school, it's a little bit different than at a small school. I was telling you a story. I was talking to Coach Jim Grove, who, of course, was the coach of Wake Forest for years and years. And what he did with what they had is really remarkable.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about a school with 1,900 undergrad.
Right.
And so you got so many scholarships that you can give out. And they would go out to practice. He said he couldn't even field a scout team. They would have guys out, they would stick brooms in the ground. Stick brooms in the ground and say, that's a guy, that's a guy. And so finally he said, well, we got to get guys on here. So they would have walk-ons come in. Now, the majority of people at Wake Forest are on academic scholarship. Right? And so they're trying to be doctors and lawyers, maintaining 4.4, 4.5.
And how many people did you say are undergrad at Wake Forest?
1,900.
That's unbelievable to me.
Right.
No wonder you can't field a scout team.
The fact that they're competitive in anything ever is remarkable.
You got a scout team with upside down trash cans, the broom stuck in for the safeties.
So he said that these guys would come out, walk out, and they would be on the team for a half a season, and their GPA would go from 4.3 to 4.1. And mommy and daddy would be like, what are you doing? You can't be out there playing football. You're trying to get into grad school. You got to follow in the footsteps. So they would quit. And so the broom would go back in the ground, and on we go. Hakuna Matata with the Wake Forest Demon Deacons.
I guess that's why I'm so thankful for guys like we talked about, Alex Perriman, that really, you would not be able to field a football team without guys like this. So my hat's off to him for sure.
All right. Do we have a champion of life today other than Brandon Adams?
I think we do have a champion of life. I think this comes from Barstool. This is such a head-scratching video for me. I don't have a ton of background.
Watch it. I haven't seen it, so.
But it looks like we've got maybe a pilot that got a little bit hungry. It's loading right now.
Oh, here we go.
Got a pilot that maybe he wanted to hit a little bit of McDonald's right here.
What is that?
That is an airplane driving down the middle of the street.
That's got to be California. That's the only place where that would fly. No,
it looks like he wanted to hit a little McDonald's on the way. The question is, did he order McDonald's and Big Macs for everybody on board?
Well, how does that happen?
I don't know, man. I wish I had some background to it. I'm just telling you right now, that pilot or whoever is running this whole contraption, 100% a Butch Jones certified champion of life for heading through that McDonald's line.
What
or
airline
Exxon
is
or whatever
that? Something postal?
Some kind of Australian kind of thing going on or something.
Look at the guy in the Del Sol. He's got his brake lights on. He doesn't know to back up.
That's because everybody's filming it. He's got the brake lights on. Everybody's got their phone up, and everybody's trying to film this champion of life. But listen, guys, thanks, Hans, for hanging out with me
you got it,
brother. Brandon Adams will be back on Monday. I know a lot of people are excited about that Dog Nation event tonight. He's going to clear his schedule after that.
I'll bring in the whole family.
And make sure he's available for SEC Country Live on Monday. But it's been a great week. Thanks to Matt Stewart, thanks to Bob Fasella, and thanks to Hans for hanging out with us today. And we'll be back, me and BA, Monday, back in our normal chairs, normal time, 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Thanks to all you back there. You guys are outstanding.
Terp, I think, is headed on vacation already. I think he's already on the plane right now. So thanks to all you guys. And
see you guys.
See you guys Monday.